at the bottom line, doping is a good business. So why should they destroy their own business? As long as sports bodies are controlling sports, so long we will not have a real good situation.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who loves to create a vision board at the beginning of every year, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Running for Real, episode number 46. I am so excited that you are here today, and this is a really special one. But before we get to that, last week we had Benji Durden on the show, who is one of the true running inspirations. He's a 2:09 marathoner who, in his 60s, is now undergoing multiple rounds of chemo while still continuing to jump in races, especially marathons, and show us where to find the joy in running all around. Even if you're in a different place to where you used to be, even if you're a lot slower than what you used to be. It really was a great interview, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now, today is a very intense, a very unique, and one-of-a-kind interview. When I reached out to my guest today, I thought it was one heck of a long shot that I would get a reply. And there was no way I would get him to commit to talking to me. But through some miracle, I did, and we set up a time to talk. That time being 9 a.m. on New Year's Day. Absolutely fine for me, as I was someone going to bed before midnight. I know, how pathetic. Didn't make it to New Year's. But I think I have enough sleepless nights ahead as of the time recording this. Hopefully by the time you are hearing this, I am maybe starting that process, but who knows? But the biggest thing I noticed was 9 a.m. on New Year's Day. I mean, that really shows how hard this guy works. So I eagerly awaited this one, unsure of how much he would be interested in talking to me, what he would be like, how much he would tell me. But at the same time, I knew that being German and being so well known for what he did in the running world, well, in the entire sporting world, that he would be straight with us in a way we had never had before on this podcast. Hajo Seppelt is the guy that broke the story about doping in Russia. He has broken multiple doping stories all across the different sports and all across the world. He was the one who convinced Yulia and Vitaly to speak out about what they had seen in Russia, which then stirred people to investigate and stirred the entire big kind of investigation of what happened. So it also brought on other things like the documentaries like Icarus on Netflix, which soon appeared afterwards. And by the way, speaking of Icarus, if you have not watched it, make sure you go watch it. It is so worth a watch, and will leave your jaw dropping on the floor. So Hajo made documentaries that have shocked the world for years now. He informed us initially of the 2006 scandal for doping in cycling. He also made a film about doping controls in China for the 2008 Summer Olympics. Again in 2010 for the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. His documentary that time was called Doping, Top Secret, Cheating on Ice, which many of you may have watched. And then he also had a 2012 report with Robert Kempe about doping among Kenyan track and field athletes, which was another big controversial one that came out for runners, and one that really started to affect us. This is the guy for investigating and sharing about doping. So when the interview time came, the first question I asked Hajo was if there was a time limit. I knew I wouldn't be able to really ask for my usual hour that I ask guests for, but his response was 15 minutes. Short, sharp, and to the point. And suddenly I began to panic. How am I possibly going to get through all the questions I have, all the things I want to know in 15 minutes? And how do I sort through which ones are most important while listening to what he is saying for follow-up questions? Oh, and all of this is obviously running through my mind, aware that every second I waste thinking about this before we get recording is another second I'm going to waste missing out on being able to actually talk to him about the topic. So I jumped right in, flustered and determined to squeeze out every second that I possibly could, and so I did. This interview is 15 minutes. It's compact, it is jaw-dropping, and it will shock, sadden, and probably frustrate you. And I'm warning you right now that probably you will never look at running, the top level running anyway, in the same way again, especially if you've not been following along with the doping scandals. But it's something that we do need to know and we do need to bring out so we can make a change as much as we possibly can to the way that we do things in the running world and the way we view the running world. So after the interview, as it is so short, I will give you a little insight into my thoughts on the topic, as I have been asked many times as an elite trying to compete against the top, how I feel knowing there are cheaters out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic too, and if you are in the Running for Real Superstars group, we will have a good discussion going in there. If you aren't in there, go join at tinamuir.com/superstars. Even if you create a Facebook account just for that reason, that's what I have and quite a few other people have. But if you are absolutely avoiding Facebook at all costs, completely understand that too. You can feel free to post your thoughts in the show notes for this episode at tinamuir.com/episode 46. All right, are you ready to hear from Hajo? Be ready to concentrate. New year, new beginnings. It's time to be a new sponsor, one who is here to help you because you put in the time, energy, and effort into looking after your health. So you kind of deserve a reward for that. Health IQ gives us lower life insurance rates for being healthy. Yet another reason to tell those naysayers why running is good for you. Find out more later in the episode. New year, new you. Well, kind of. By now, most of us know that big New Year's resolutions really don't stick most of the time. But small ones that we can actually stick to, they will make a heck of a difference. Just like adding Body Health Perfect Amino to your routine made a big difference for me, and it could to you too. Hajo, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. This is a very, very special one for me, and I'm excited that you are here. So thanks for giving us some time today.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to dive right in because we want to get as much covered as we can. You know, you are known for kind of being the one who broke all the news about doping, you know, in track and field and cycling, the Winter Olympics. There's all kinds of things about that. But firstly, for our listeners who are wondering, you know, we've got to this point where it seems like every day, every week, we're coming out with something new. Do you think that we are at a point where things are starting to change, or do you think it's just going to continue to keep getting worse? As you know, as we learn new techniques to catch them, people learn new techniques to get ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that the situation is worse than 10 or 20 years ago. I think it's even better than in the past. That the impression people get is based on the situation that we have a different media coverage today about doping in sports. 20 years, 30 years ago, there have been just a handful of journalists globally who were working on that field, and they didn't work in an investigative way. They worked more or less reacting on things which happened. So things in the last couple of years have been unveiled by investigative journalists all around the world, also by German television ARD, and that leads us to the impression that we have now a situation which is worse, which is more alarming than years ago. The only difference from my point of view is that it's much more transparent, and we see now the whole dependencies in the world of sports. We see how sports bodies, how sports organizations are deal with the doping issue, with the corruption matters. So everything is more transparent, and that gives us a feeling that we are now in a situation which is worse than before.
Okay. And so do you think that things will continue to push to a point where we will eventually get to a point where we can have clean sports, or is that not really realistic?
You can never expect clean sports. That's, to be honest, that's a product of fantasy. And it's really not what's going on in the whole world. And sports is just a small part of the society. So how can you expect in society, for example, that people in a car driving a car don't cross a red light anymore? They will do in future as they did in the past. The only problem is how many people, let's say how the people who are dealing with the public order, police guys, for example, are policing the society, are policing politics, are policing the rules in the public domain. And exactly the same we are experiencing in sports. So how can you expect if an international sports body like the IOC is, in fact, from my point of view, for many, many years, if you see it at the bottom line, not very much interested to address that issue in a proper way. And that makes it so complicated. If you have the feeling that the promoter of sports is on one hand trying to get more profit, more benefit from sport, on the other hand, he should be the police guard, the officer who's controlling sports, but having in mind that doping doesn't disturb sports, but the opposite is true. It helps to promote sports because it have better performances. If you have better achievements, better results in high class events, then you have more spectators, you have higher TV ratings, you have sponsors who have a bigger benefit from it. So to be honest, at the bottom line, doping is a good business. So why should they destroy their own business? That is the question we have to address. And so what I said in the past for many, many times already, and I repeat it here, as long as sports bodies and their entourage and their organizations who are dependent on them are controlling sports, so long we will not have a real good situation where we can say, okay, there is a chance to improve the situation.
And so, you said that it's not really going to happen, and realistically that is definitely the case. But in a perfect world, in theory, what could the IOC, the International Association of Athletics Federation, what could they do to address this if there were some changes to be made?
The IAAF had a really big problem a couple of years ago that was also based by the findings of our investigation team. So they had to react in a way, and they did actually react in a better way than the IOC did. So they understood the message. They understood that we have to do something in order to clean up the mess, and at least they tried. I would not say that they succeed in every detail, but at least they do it a little better than years ago. It's the same, although I have some issues regarding the dealing with the Chris Froome case, I would say that the UCI, the International Cycling Union, is doing better than years ago. The IOC, from my point of view, has a big problem. The problem number one is his president, Mr. Thomas Bach. He is a gravedigger of sports, from my point of view, because how he is dealing with the Russian doping matter says a lot about his priorities. Instead of sending a clear message, a public clear message to Russia that whistleblowers not only need a protection, but to tell them that if they don't stop with the retaliation of a whistleblower, with sending death threats to a whistleblower, if they don't stop, they will not be allowed to compete at the games. But exactly that is what Mr. Bach is not doing. So it shows clearly from my point of view that it's obviously more important for him to have Russia on board instead of really in a effective way protecting a whistleblower who unveiled the whole Russian doping system.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that. And for those who don't know, maybe they haven't been involved or understood doping as much, how much of a sacrifice are these whistleblowers making? I mean, in your documentary, you talked a lot about the ones in Russia, but tell us just how much are they risking here when they do say something?
It depends on their personal situation. Obviously, in Russia, it was more risky and more dangerous as it would maybe in other countries. If you blow the whistle, it doesn't matter wherever you are, it's always a little risky. But if you are living in a country like Russia, where obviously you are treated like a traitor if you just oppose the public opinion in your home country, and if they tell you that this is not patriotic and you have to act in the interest of your own country, if they don't understand that cannot be the right way, and that's not, to be honest, also not very democratic. So then they really face serious issues in their countries. So for Vitaly and Yulia Stepanov, it was obviously so risky that they told me when we prepared the first documentary in 2014, and I have a deep understanding for their approach. When they said, okay, Hajo, you are allowed to publish our interviews, to publish our evidence, but beforehand we have to leave our country. And that's exactly how we did it. So here I see that the precondition is for investigative journalism with whistleblowers who help to unveil the truth is to protect them. And that's exactly what we try, at least in our frame of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I don't have the feeling that Thomas Bach and the IOC uses all possibilities they have to protect a whistleblower. And if you see that Russia will now be allowed at the Winter Olympics with not with their own flag, not with their own anthem, but with shirts and and the logo with the title Olympic Athletes from Russia, and they will be allowed eventually, I guess, at the closing ceremony to be again in the circuit with their own flag, with their anthem. I have absolutely no understanding for that, and that makes it very clear where are the priorities for the IOC.
Absolutely. And with relating to Russia kind of competing as individuals in that way, do you think that there are any clean Russian athletes at this time, or is it the system still kind of working against most people in that they are kind of finding ways around it?
I simply don't know that. I cannot tell.
Okay.
But we have no guarantee that these people are clean, and because the system in Russia failed, and as you know, every athlete knows that doping has a long-term effect, not only for a couple of days or months or weeks. It can last for years, because if you prepare with a doping protocol for big events for years, then you have a benefit from it also a couple of years later. Mm-hmm. So that's obvious, and for everyone who has a little bit understanding of how doping substances work, it's clearly said that every athlete in the world, not only the Russians who were doped, for example, in 2014 and 2015, has an indirect long-term benefit from that use of substances today. Mm-hmm. This is one thing. The other thing is, and that makes it for me so complicated, seeing Russia, seeing the majority of Russian athletes ignoring the facts, denying the obvious facts from the McLaren report, which clearly made obvious for everyone, also for the IOC, that we talked about a state-run doping system with clear evidence and also with obviously a big credibility of the whistleblower Grigory Rodchenkov. The Russians still fail and still retaliate the whistleblower and try to make him silent.
Yep.
And also threaten and want to sue and send spies to the United States to chase him. I don't see any understanding. I don't see any regret from the Russian side. And so from me, if you allow them to compete in this way, that is kind of kowtow towards Russia.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for giving us your opinion there, and definitely very, very valuable to us listening. Now, there has been talk about scrapping world records due to not being able to ensure that there was not doping. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say it's really a complicated matter. I think that the best way is that we should think about in general, and that is a more broader view on the whole issue. If we need world records in athletics, that is a question I would.
Interesting.
Yes, because why do we need someone who is running 9:58? We need that time seeing on the scoreboard. Why? If we would have not a time-based results list, if we would have just there's a winner, there's a second place, a third place. With your eyes, would you see? If there would be no timing in an event like the 100 meter, for example, would you see the difference with your eyes? You would see it if he's running 9:58 or 9:65 or 9:94. No one sees that with your own eyes. If you talk about bobsled, for example, where we talk about 1,000th of a second, which makes a difference between the first and the second or the third, it doesn't make any sense for me. Mm-hmm. We don't need that. Maybe in bobsled a little different because they don't compete against each other. So I see there's a difference. But then I would say if there's one person with 1,000 in front of the other one with 1,000 behind, I would say they are equal. They need both the gold medal because there's no difference. So, and in athletics, I would say, if we would have no timing, then we would concentrate, we would focus on that what makes sports for me so meaningful and important. That means you race against another. It's a competition.
Yeah, very true.
But it's not about reaching the next world record. And to be honest and to be quite clear on that also, if we are talking about world records, that is good for the sponsors. That is good to invest even more in to be honest, also in doping, to improve the results, because the capacity of a human being is limited in a way. So I would be really, really careful with that. I would really think we need a kind of revolution in our approach to sports. And that leads me to the question if the timing, for example, in athletics is still the right measure. And I tell you, if we would at least reduce that, fact a little, it would help that people focus on that, what is really important. That means it's a competition, man versus man.
Yes, very true. And I wonder how much of that comes into what you were talking about earlier with the IOC and it being about the money, losing a lot of the kind of, that would, people would worry that would lose some of the excitement because of focusing, losing that focus on time and fastest time ever. Just finally, to wrap up here, what are you focusing on in the future? What can we look forward to from you? Is there a particular area you're digging into?
I will not tell you.
Okay, absolutely fine. We will find out for ourselves soon enough. Well, Hajo, thank you so much for your interview today. This has been fascinating and really opened our eyes. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Did you know that research has shown runners have a 30% lower risk of mortality, a 45% lower risk of death from heart disease, and a 20% reduced risk of 7 types of cancers? So next time those naysayers tell you running is bad for your knees, throw that at them. Most insurance companies throw us in with everyone else, assuming we're sitting on the couch all day eating McDonald's. But there is one that recognizes all that time and hard work we put into looking after our health. Health IQ secures us runners lower rates on life insurance as a reward for our health effort to live a health-conscious lifestyle. So like you save money on insurance for being a good driver, Health IQ makes sure we save money on our life insurance too. And you can also upload your race results and Strava data to get you additional savings. I know you guys are going to like that part. You can find out more and get a free quote at healthiq.com/runningforreal. Earlier on in the show, I mentioned that Body Health Perfect Amino made a big difference to me, and it really did, especially at this time of year when marathon training starts and things begin to get really tough. This is always a time we feel a bit overwhelmed as the accumulation of miles starts to catch up, especially when combined with those hard, heavy training runs. I found that taking Body Health Perfect Amino made my body recover from training that much quicker, meaning I could really attack those long runs and hard sessions. But it's not just for marathoners, it can be runners of any distance. If you get sore or fatigued during training, Body Health Perfect Amino will help you recover too, and here's why. Your body absorbs 99% of the amino acids in Body Health Perfect Amino, compared with only 48% in eggs and 32% in meat or fish. I would take them immediately after a run, and as they absorb within 25 minutes, that would give me a nice amount of time to stretch, another component of staying healthy. Then you can enjoy your post-race meal. Get 10% off at bodyhealth.com using coupon code TINA10. Absolutely fascinating, right? I told you it was intense, and it was short, but I think we managed to get a lot in for such a short interview. So kind of sad, scary, depressing that he believes we will never have a clean sport again. But at the same time, once you take the wool off your eyes, you can see why. He's right. We won't. There's just too much at stake. So I thought for a minute I would talk about my thoughts as an elite runner. Obviously, I am taking a break from that right now, but it's still something very close to me and something I have experienced and hope to maybe experience again. So from my perspective as an elite, there's been many races where I've stood on the start line knowing that there may be other people on that start line who are using or have used performance-enhancing drugs. And especially what Hajo said, that, the effects of that don't necessarily stop. As soon as you stop taking them, they continue. And, knowing that people may have, learned the right way and stopped taking them now, but they're still essentially gaining the benefits. It can be frustrating, and I have thought about it a lot. But for me, I've always been someone who just wants to be my best, run as fast as I can. But it does make me think about where I could have been. How good could I have been? Now I step away, I see that I have a lot more to offer the world than just a ranking next to my name. So I think I let it bother me a lot less than other runners, especially at that top level. But I mean, who knows on the return? I was never really screwed over by someone who was found cheating. So it doesn't really affect me as closely. I mean, obviously, I have been in races with cheaters, and there have been quite a few who have been caught, winners of races I've been in that have been caught and outed. And I know that technically I did finish higher up. But for me, I wasn't close enough to the top to really make a difference to my life or to my self-esteem. I didn't really make significantly less money in any way, if any money in a lot of the cases for me. Much less money that would have really made a difference. Now, next month, you're going to hear from Cara Goucher, and you will really hear how much of a difference it made to her life. So that will make you think a lot more. And it really made me think about what she said. She lost so much because of a lot of these cheaters, and her life could have gone in a completely different direction, or maybe not direction, but she could have had a lot more opportunities open up had she not had those people in her race. Now, his thought on his idea to remove times, distances, heights from things, it made a lot of sense for me, but this is actually one I would probably struggle with, because as I am someone further down in the scheme of things, obviously this is relative, someone further down, for me, running a fast time meant a lot more than where I would finish. Finishing 18th in a big race that was stacked with some of the best in the country, yeah, that's great, but if I ran a big PR, I was more happy with that. So I would find it a little bit harder to motivate myself. But that being said, obviously that would mean I would finish a little bit higher if we removed some of the people there who shouldn't be there. And I did find that when I was racing, I was a good racer. I do like to race. And when I was in a situation against others when it mattered, I actually always performed, and usually performed well above my level. So I probably would enjoy it if I got used to it. But like I asked Hajo, I just don't ever think that would happen, because the spectator value would drop. And I think a lot of the participation rates wouldn't be as interesting, because you wouldn't have the time or the striving for, being closer to a standard, and how we would kind of measure that. Although, again, I do like the idea of trials. We don't have a trial as such in England. There is one, but it doesn't really decide much. They do take other people based on time or performance and other things. And I do kind of miss that. I like that the US system has a trials. And as I said, I have always been someone who performs, so I would like that kind of aspect of it. But then I think about people like Usain Bolt. How many people watched when they thought he might run another world record? And sure, it was also about him finishing, way ahead of the rest of the field. But it was also a lot about the time, whether he broke the world record again. So I don't really know what the solution is, or how we're ever going to pull out the reputation of our sport back up to the level it was. Now, again, as I said at the beginning, I really would love to hear your thoughts. So you can either join in the discussion on the Running for Real Superstars group, which I mentioned you can join at tinamuir.com/superstars. Or you can post your thoughts in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 46. In those show notes, I will also have a lot of the links to Hajo's other documentaries, information about it, just some other things if you wanted to read up a bit more on this. I know this is something that will pique a lot of people's interest, and maybe you had no idea that all of this was going on. Maybe you'd seen some odd things about doping, but didn't really realize how big of a problem this actually was. And finally, as this is a shorter episode, I really would strongly encourage you to go watch Icarus. It is a Netflix documentary. Make sure you tweet at me if you did watch it, because I would love to hear what you think, or maybe share your thoughts again on the show notes. But Icarus is another documentary kind of talking about this, and I found it absolutely fascinating, and I think you will too. I want to take a moment to thank you for listening today. I appreciate it so much, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. It was something completely different. We were incredibly lucky to get Hajo even to commit to a 15-minute interview with how in demand he is. And if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, please do so. So these episodes go directly to you every Friday. If you aren't comfortable doing that, could you leave me a review on iTunes, please? Both subscribing and leaving reviews send big signals to iTunes that you like my show. And the more you do that, the more it will put my podcast in front of others. When you type in running or runner into a search, the more of those I get, the more I can get guests like Hajo, who will hopefully make it more enjoyable for you. If you are not a Apple or an iOS person, you can absolutely do it on Stitcher, your other podcast player, or you can just kind of make sure that you share it with other people. That really helps me too. I want to thank you so much in advance for your reviews, for subscribing, and for sharing it with anyone that you choose to share. So next week, I have Kiralee Deer on the show. She's an everyday runner from New Zealand, but she's doing these incredible things like covering 80 kilometers a day for almost 2 weeks to raise money for her charity Run Against Violence. It's a volunteer-based association focused on starting conversations about family violence. So it's something that is really close to her heart, and her story should inspire you to see what you can do for things that you're really passionate about and how you can use your running to help others. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.